I want to first thank everyone for joining both this specific orientation as well as joining the School of Medicine faculty. It's an exciting time for us. You know, we've been gearing up over the past 5 years and now have a full class of 160-ish, 5-ish students to be in the neighborhood of. And of course, with that scaling up comes the need for increasing numbers of faculty. And we're all eager to have you join. And I think you'll get a sense of the enthusiasm and the newness of what we're doing and the excitement that really is behind it. Again, today we're basically going to get a broad view from our new interim dean. Dr. Jeffrey Broskamp will give us an overview of the sort of broad mission and vision as echoed from our founding dean, Dr. Bonnie Stanton, who many of you know recently passed away. And then Dr. Miriam Hoffman, the Senior Associate Dean, is going to basically give us a fairly detailed review of the overall School of Medicine curriculum. And then I'll dive into the phase 1 opportunities for teaching. And then Dr. Hagopian, who runs the phase 2 committee, will actually go through some of the phase 2 and phase 3 opportunities and beyond. We'll be touching on some of the beyonds as well. And Dr. Tulecki then will be joining us to actually spend some time talking about opportunities for research and scholarship within the School of Medicine. And of course, we must go through some core critical policies, and Dean Sullivan will be joining us to go through some of the core resources and policy for the School of Medicine. I'm going to try to sneak in some faculty development at the end. We all feel obliged to do that whenever possible, but we'll see how much time there is and whether indeed we have a few extra minutes to sneak in a little faculty development. Maybe if we keep the baseball discussions to a minimum, we might have a little extra time to do some faculty development. At the end of this session, we're going to be respectful of your time, but I and a number of the other deans on the core cabinet will be happy to stay on and answer your questions about any specific course programs or any other questions that you have about the School of Medicine. Just next slide real quickly sort of gives you a visual of the members of the School of Medicine cabinet. This is not the entire cabinet, but these are many of the core members of the cabinet that run the various groups within the School of Medicine. You'll be meeting many of them today. Next slide. And again, these slides will be available for you. These are some of the critical members of the Office of Faculty, the Office of Medical Education, the specific coursework that we'll be talking about in terms of small group courses in particular. And in the next slide, it's also the team members that are in the Office of Research led by Dr. Tulecki and the Office of Student Affairs, which is led by Dean Sullivan. Next slide. And again, this is really for everyone's reference. These slides will be made available to everyone, but these are the key leadership people in the clerkship itself. And now, without further ado, again, I'm not going to be giving bio introductions to everyone. Otherwise, we consume all of our time. Let it just be said that Dr. Boskamp, now the interim dean and professor of pediatrics, was literally at the table when there was no one else at the table. He was the School of Medicine for a period of time in the initial phases, representing the idea of the School of Medicine at Hackensack Meridian. And I know from personal experience that he has toiled the better part of 15 or 20 years to bring this moment to fruition. So Dr. Boskamp, take it away.
Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. And yeah, it's been a little bit of a climb, but boy, has it been worth it. It's all came to a amazing moment last June 3rd when our first 18 graduates walked across the stage. It became more real than it had ever been after all those years. But so many people along the way did that. So let me echo what Dr. Giuliano said. Thanks for being here on the call, but more importantly, thanks for wanting to teach our students and wanting to be on our faculty, because nothing happens without you and your efforts, and that is truly what makes us a school. Next slide. So, you know, we all need to take a deep breath. This has been a very hard time at the school, and I'm sure you all know that our visionary dean passed away suddenly. She was everything we wanted the school to be. From the moment we met her on the search committee, we knew that she embodied all of the attributes that we wanted to see in our graduates. And she led us to that day on June 3rd through accreditation, but mostly through vision of what the school wanted to be. I get asked a lot about why we wanted to start a new school of medicine. And it had very little or nothing to do with wanting to produce more doctors to address a real doctor shortage. It was much more aspirational than that. But we thank Bonnie, and it's her energy that brings us forward to develop and enhance the legacy that she leaves us. So next slide. So we didn't do a medical school because we wanted to produce more doctors. Doing a new medical school is a gift. It's a tabula rasa, it's a blank slate. And if you have real aspirations to change the next generation of doctors, this is how you do it. Very hard to turn around that aircraft carrier of established medical schools who have always taught in a certain way and have a faculty that are embedded in the difficulty of change. We don't have to deal with that issue of change because we started everything from ground zero. So we knew what we wanted this school to look like. And we knew that health outcomes weren't where they wanted to be. Really, it was about value. Our outcomes clearly weren't nationally, were not what they should be for the amount that we spent. And this was certainly one of Bonnie's driving visions. And the educational considerations, which are the exciting part, that there are better ways to learn, there are better ways to teach. And we knew that, we didn't have to go through the trauma of curricular reform, which can be incredibly difficult, because we could do it right from the very beginning. Next slide. So it's about value. And we knew that one of the cornerstones of our new school would be that we needed to tackle the problems in American healthcare, that we were spending way too much money for the outcomes that we were getting. The care is incredible. We do things in the United States that people from all over the world envy and actually come here to have done. But our overall healthcare in getting the health of every individual citizen better has not been anywhere near where it should be. And that is no more true than health inequities, where there are huge parts of our population who do not get health or health care in a way that makes their life longer and more fulfilling. Next slide. So this sums it up, right? Here's all the very developed nations. What we spend is more than anybody else per capita, and our life expectancy isn't anywhere near it should be. Next slide. And it's dropping. So not only is it not going up for the amount of money that we spend every year, but in fact, it's actually dropping, and it's continued to drop. And this, of course, is pre-COVID. This is life expectancy in the US will decline even further with the effect of COVID. Next slide. But more importantly, the inequities. So Hispanic women are twice as likely to have cervical cancer than whites. Black women are twice as likely to die from the disease. Blacks are 3 times more likely to die from asthma than whites. Next slide. Maternal mortality, how can that be in this country, that Black mothers have many multiples of what white mothers have in terms of maternal mortality, and look at infant mortality as well. Totally unacceptable. And this is something that our school wants to tackle and wants our graduates to understand and do something about from their first day of school. Next slide. And it finally came to national attention in a way that it should, or at least was enhanced by the obvious fact that minority populations were being hit harder than anybody else in terms of the onslaught of COVID. Next slide. So is there hope? Next slide. We think so. And from day one, our students live and breathe the social determinants of health. And so we make a real distinction between health and healthcare. I think medical schools traditionally have taught healthcare, but we're teaching health. Next slide. And that's important because healthcare is only 10% of the story of how people stay healthy. Next slide. So our vision, which we embrace and it drives everything that we do, is that each person in New Jersey and the USA, regardless of race, socioeconomic status, will enjoy the highest levels of wellness in an economically and behaviorally sustainable fashion. It's a carefully worded vision that we try to live to every day. Next slide. And our mission is, we get students who are unbelievably compassionate and empathetic when they enter because we pick those students for those characteristics. In many ways, they're more important than their MCATs and their GPAs. Of course, they have to have those, but what we're looking for is a different breed. And what we're trying to do at the school is nurture and maintain the empathy and compassion that they enter with. That is something that all of our faculty are aware of, need to be aware of. It should be something that, really drives us. But, these are our missions. And that includes the learning part of integrating lifelong learning and inquiry into their practice to develop critical thinkers, problem solvers, not just to feed them information that will be outdated 5 years after they get out. So to have them know how to attack problems and not just simply give them spoon-fed lectures. We do sessions, and we make that distinction between lectures and sessions in a big way because sessions are students interacting and teaching each other. Next slide. All done in the context of the community. So we make no distinction between basic science and clinical curriculum. We try to teach everything in a clinically relevant way. When I speak to the applicants, I always tell them that, I was really pretty sick of seeing the Krebs cycle by the time I got to medical school and never did really have used it since. Some people will go into metabolics and need it, but if we teach it, it's going to be in the context of why you need to know it as a physician. So we have a very exciting curriculum the students realize, often taught by many of you. So the clinical side is there. Integrated curriculum, team-oriented, team-based learning, faculty as guides rather than sages on the stage. This is the way that we're teaching, and our students want to be taught this way. Next slide. So I think you'll hear a lot more about curriculum. I'm not going to get into that, but it is innovative. This option of being able to finish in 3 years or stay for a 4th year, that truly is worth something. All of you know that in many, many cases, 4th year was a throwaway compared to the first 3 years. We decided we would do a 4th year that would really be worth it, that students could develop their passions, intellectual passions, clinical passions, that they would be able to use that 4th year to really transition well to residency. And dual degrees, you'll hear all about the options. Next slide. So quick history for those of you that haven't been to the school. This is our amazing building. This was the legacy of Roche Pharmaceuticals, who built this 128-acre campus in 1928, right on Route 3. At one point, I think there were close to 100 buildings and 10,000 employees. They merged with Genentech, decided to close this facility, moved to South San Francisco. Nobody knew it was going to happen. We looked at this building, and this particular building where our learning spaces are, was all labs. Interferon was first synthesized, Valium was first synthesized, ceftriaxone, the antibiotic, important antibiotic, also synthesized. So it was a great scientific legacy. Unfortunately, we had to tear out 4 floors of labs. Fortunately, we had an architect that took our curriculum and said, we're going to build you the space to teach the way you want to teach. Small groups, flipped classroom. That's very hard for schools that are doing curriculum reform that are stuck with a bunch of lecture halls. Next slide. So we built it based on the curriculum. These architects looked at the curriculum and said, this is the space you're going to need to teach this curriculum. Very, very much of a gift. Next slide. And because you haven't been to the school, this is our largest learning studio. We have many others of these that are smaller, but this is where students learn in groups of 8 and problem solve and work together, and amazing audio visual where they can basically teach each other. Next slide. And this is our amphitheater, where the rows actually are staggered and they're rising so students can flip their chairs and talk to each other and work. Next slide. It's a beautiful space that we opened in September. We do share it with the College of Nursing at Seton Hall and the School of Health and Medical Sciences, the Allied Health, OT, PT, speech, PAs, athletic trainers, et cetera. So there's great opportunities for interprofessional education here. Next slide. And here's where we are. I think you heard that we're current class, our 5th class, we're recruiting 165, but we've had this ramp up. We graduated 18 in our first class, another 13, another 39 4th-year students who stayed for the full 4 years will graduate on June 8th. Next slide. Along with the 3-year. So I'm not going to get into the continuum. I think you know what it is, but I do want to tell you that that is another focus of ours. There's really been tremendous, next slide, tremendous siloing of undergraduate med ed and graduate med ed, and we are trying very hard to smooth those transitions. Next slide. So, there hasn't been a unifying vision. We are trying to do that and make these transitions, which can be incredibly difficult for medical students, to be much more simple. Next slide. And so we are working on those transitions. And one of the transitions that I want to tell you very quickly about is our 3-year graduation program, our accelerated med ed program. Next slide. And this is just to remind everybody that it's a new school, but at Hackensack Meridian, we are not new to academics or to teaching, that we've always done it through our appointments at Robert Wood, at NJMS, and at other schools where people have taught. So, but this was a great opportunity to do this school and develop residencies that are closely aligned and have our own academic platform, which is what we've done. Next slide. So basically, you have this opportunity to do these amazing things in the 4th year that you'll hear about, or you can graduate at the end of 3. So all of our students will have finished the core 3-year curriculum, and then they have the opportunity to go into a Hackensack Meridian residency. They theoretically can go to another residency outside, but it's very early in their training, and they really have only been halfway through their clerkships, et cetera. So it's not really a viable alternative. Almost all of them will come to Hackensack Meridian residencies, and you will see them there. Next slide. So it's obvious why we do this, right? I already told you about the transition, that they know at the beginning of their 3rd year where they're going, and they're able to embed themselves into the residency that they're going, which makes for a great transition. They also, by the way, get some relief from the crushing student debt by having 1 year less of tuition. Next slide. And so here are the programs that they're available for the 3 years that you can see. And right now our students are availing themselves of virtually all of them. Next slide. So here's where they are. You can see the residency programs that are available to our 3-year graduates. We do have some new residencies coming on that will not be part of the 3-year program, but we have a nice selection of all the core residencies for our students to come into. Next slide. And so this is what happened in the first year. As I said, we had 18 graduates, and they graduated June 3rd, and all 18 got first choice of the residency they wanted at the place where they wanted it. And then we went through the cycle again. Next slide. Last year. And so this was a bigger group. This is the group that's going to, 29 that are graduating this June. And you can see a really nice spread of both institutions and specialties that they're going into. And all but 2 that wanted to get into these programs got in. So 29 out of 31, and we were happy with that. And there were some specific circumstances about the other 2. Next slide. So accreditation, just to mention, we're almost there. We're close to the finish line on full accreditation from Middle States, which allows us to grant our degree as an independent academic institution, and the LCME, which we're hoping to get full accreditation after a site visit in September, which would then set us up for no further accreditation visits from them for at least 6 years. So next slide. So our students are doing great. They're amazingly talented. They have done incredibly well on the board scores. I'm sure Dr. Hoffman will tell you that, but they are, and Dr. Terlecki will tell you about the amazing work they're doing in research and publishing already. They are outstanding. Next slide. And they're also outstanding just as people. So next slide. This is our first white coat. But they were there when everything was being held back in COVID. They had stations at the mega site for immunization at the Meadowlands, and they were excited to be able to help. At one point, that site was immunizing 4,500 people a day, and the medical students were right in the middle of it, and it was a great experience. But there are so many ways that they're in the community and taking care of our patients. So that next slide. So Dean Stanton had one of her residents who was Mona Hanna Atisha, and she was the pediatrician who revealed the lead in the water at Flint. This is the type of students that we want to produce, that are involved in the community, that are smart, engaged, and we are doing that. Next slide. So again, I just want to really thank you for wanting to teach, for the inspiration and effort that you're going to give our students. We really appreciate it. And like I said at the beginning, no possibility that this school would be anything without our outstanding faculty. So thanks to all of you. Sorry if I went a minute or 2 late, but I think you get the view of how excited we are to be doing this and to have you guys on board.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Boskamp. You were actually right on time. I'm very impressed yet again. But I think one of the points that you made, I think, is so critical to echo is that, this school is really not just about undergraduate medical education. This school is really about changing everything across the entire spectrum. And indeed, the work that the School of Medicine does is to indeed develop not just the students in terms of their ability to make a difference in the world, but the residents as well as our faculty. And indeed, we integrate our faculty development, our resident development, our student development in a way that they're all seeing basically the same kinds of things. So that's an important point that gets raised whenever we discuss the school, but I think it's really so critical. Thanks again, Dr. Boskamp. I can't tell you how much we appreciate you bringing all of this to us today and to continue the legacy of Dr. Stanton.
No,
Without further ado, next slide is Dr. Hoffman, who's the primary architect of the overall curriculum, is going to talk with us today with a bit of a broader view of the overall structure of the curriculum. And as she speaks, I want you to take notes on stuff that interests you, because we'll be asking you in more detail as we move forward for opportunities for you to step into to teach. Dr. Hoffman, I believe you're here.
Yep. Thank you so much, Michael. And so great to see everybody here today. And I certainly echo my thanks of what has been said already in terms of how all of you have already contributed to our students and their growth and development. So you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. It's a pretty incredible thing to get a phone call saying, hey, do you want to come join a team and build a medical school from a blank slate in a mission-driven way? And that is truly how we built the curriculum. As was mentioned, the very first thing we created was the vision for the school. My favorite definition of the word vision is, how is the world going to be different because of the work that we're all doing together? And it may sound a little bit grandiose that through teaching a first year or second year medical student, we're going to change the face of healthcare outcomes regionally or even beyond. But if you take a step back and think about all of the patients that your students will care for over the course of their career, all of the residents they'll supervise, the students they'll teach, the patients they'll care for, the potential impact of what we're talking about here really is quite large. Taking that big picture vision a little bit more down onto the ground, you can see this, what we call our goalpost slides, gives you a little bit more of a sense of who our graduates are, who our students are already in many ways. All of our students will understand the role of community and context on health outcomes. And in fact, we use the concept of the determinants of health broadly as the frame for the entire curriculum. So if the determinants of health are the different types of factors that we know are what impacts health outcomes, the biologic and genetic, the social, the environmental, the economic, and so forth, it makes sense that that would be what you learn in medical school, but it's really not always the case. Very central to what our students are developing are the skills and ability to find the best information in real time to inform their patient care. And this entire sort of skill set and longitudinal content thread is really critical so that we can develop students who are lifelong learners, because, you know, half of what we're teaching them this year is going to be wrong in the course of a couple of years. And we really need to ensure that our students have those abilities and skills to practice medicine in the information age. Beyond the one-on-one patient care that our students will provide, we really are creating physicians who are not afraid to identify problems and come up with solutions at any level, from that one-on-one patient care level all the way up to the system level, really defining the term system broadly. Next slide, please. These are some of the key features of our curriculum, and we've already mentioned a couple of them. So the first is integration. Our curriculum is entirely integrated. What you won't see that many of us may have trained in is a weekly schedule in the pre-clerkship curriculum where you have anatomy on Monday, pharmacology on Tuesday, public health on Wednesday. Rather, our students are in one course at any given time that integrates all of the content from the biomedical, behavioral, social, and health system sciences, because of course, patients are integrated beings, right? Everything they learn is ground certainly in context and community, but also in its direct clinical relevance. So every week in phase one, our pre-clerkship curriculum is framed by a weekly patient presentation. Every week starts out the same way. Our students are sitting with their team of about 8 students, and we give them a one-liner, 57-year-old guy with chest pain, and they start working through that cycle of clinical reasoning. Okay, what's your differential? What additional clinical information do you need? Okay, here's more information. Now go back and revise your differential. The case will play out throughout the course of the week in a whole variety of ways, and it will culminate in a Friday morning small group led by a clinical faculty where the students work to integrate all of the content from all of the disciplines and specialties and sciences that they've learned, integrating all that together and applying it to that patient case. We very much have an active learning curriculum. So these are not sort of lectures where our students are, you know, home in their pajamas watching them on 2x speed. Rather, the students are doing work before class so that in-class time can be used for using that information, applying it to a case, solving a problem, higher order cognitive work. I already mentioned a bit about lifelong learning. I won't go into too much detail on our competency-based clinical skills curriculum, but I'll just say that it's driven by a 2-part goal. Part one is that our students are Part one of the goal is that our students will be meaningful contributors to the patient care team on day one of their first block clerkship. That's really part one on the way to part two, which is that our students are at the level of a high functioning intern at the start of their residency. And this, we've really been able to achieve these goals, which has been incredible. And it's through a whole variety of methods using standardized patients, simulation, work in the clinical setting, clinical coaching, video observation, workshops, and so forth. Finally, medicine is a team sport. And this informs, of course, what we're teaching, but also how we're teaching. So we use a fair amount of a methodology called team-based learning. TBL is a teaching methodology that helps students get to those higher cognitive goals. It's a very feedback-rich environment. But through the course of the session, not only are students achieving those goals, but they're also learning those critical team skills like accountability, communication, collaboration, all those things that we know they need to thrive in the clinical setting. Next slide, please. So this is our overall curriculum. We call it 3+1. So we have a 3-year core curriculum, which is phases 1 and 2, followed by the individualized phase 3. So students will work with their advisors and their mentors from the beginning of their time at the school to build a phase 3 program that meets their educational and professional goals, as well as their developmental needs. So they can do a master's degree or a certificate, a research immersion, a clinical immersion, a community-based project. They also have that option, as was mentioned, to graduate after 3 years and go directly into residency at that point. Within the 3-year core curriculum, we have phase 1, our pre-clerkship curriculum, which is 16 months long, followed by phase 2, clerkships, boards, and advanced clinical rotations. At the heart of our curriculum is a course called the Human Dimension, which is longitudinal, lasts the entire core curriculum. Within the Human Dimension, a pair of medical students is matched up with a family in the community. They follow these folks longitudinally over time and through structured experiences in the family's home, in community-based settings, in clinical settings, in virtual settings, the determinants of health come to life for the students. The students are also trained to help and provide benefit to the families and communities that we're partnering with, that they're partnering with. There is also a community assessment and community health piece to Human Dimension, where a small group of 8 students is matched up with a local community. They do a systematic community assessment leading to a community health project. Everything that students do within the Human Dimension is linked and integrated to what they're doing in the rest of the curriculum. So for example, if they're doing anatomy of the heart in anatomy lab and cardiovascular disease in the classroom, they might go and meet with their family and do a cardiovascular risk assessment. Then do a food map of that person's community to assess, do they live in a food desert? Can they get fresh fruits and vegetables? What are the modifiable risk factors that that individual can set as goals for themselves? Next slide, please. So this is a zoom in on our phase 1 curriculum. As I said, 16 months long. Human Dimension continues throughout. We actually begin with an immersion in Human Dimension. Students proceed through 7 block courses. The first 2 are foundational, followed by 5 system structured courses. And as I said, each week of this curriculum is framed by that weekly patient presentation. We also have longitudinal content areas that continue throughout these courses and on into phase 2. Next slide, please. This is what a typical week in phase 1 looks like. As I mentioned, every Monday starts off with that patient presentation, beginning working through the case and so forth. The case will play out throughout the week. So for example, it might be a case with a pleural effusion, and on Tuesday, they're doing a lab on body fluid analysis, and they'll get the results of the pleural fluid tap of the patient from that week. On Wednesday, they might be learning the lung exam, and they'll see the patient as a standardized patient in the Clinical Skills Center. And again, that will culminate in that Friday morning small group led by a clinical faculty. You can see we have team-based learning, as I mentioned. Our large group active learning sessions are things that look the most like a lecture, but again, there, students are doing pre-work beforehand, and in-class time is preserved for using that information in an active way. Students also spend time, of course, in the clinical setting through clinical placements that you'll hear more about, and in community-based settings. Next slide. This is a zoom in on phase 2. All students begin together with a transitional clerkship designed to really boost them off that solid foundation they got in phase 1 so that they can meet that goal of hitting the ground running in their first block clerkship. They proceed through a year of clerkships in all different orders. We have a lottery for them to provide their preferences, and we have an emphasis on the outpatient setting in all of our clerkships because, of course, that's where care takes place. This is followed by time to take step 1 of the boards, then advanced clinical rotations, which includes a sub-internship and critical care selective, a couple electives, and finishing up step 2. At that point, they're done with the core curriculum and will go on to their individualized program that they've developed along with their mentors and advisors. Next slide. You can go, I said that already, you can go by. Perfect. We just want to mention, I mentioned earlier that we have a number of longitudinal content areas. One very critically important one is professionalism and professional identity formation. And you can see the 4 domains that we focus on within this realm: leadership, growth and pursuit of excellence, professional behaviors, and humanism. And these manifest throughout the curriculum. When you have an integrated curriculum, you can avoid the kind of siloing. So I'm doing science on Monday, and on Wednesday is when I do that professionalism stuff. No, things like reflection, growth, setting goals is integrated into every aspect of the curriculum, both in phase 1 as well in phase 2. Next slide. And here you just see the different categories of opportunities that our students can choose from as they build that individualized program when they get to phase 3. So thank you so much. I'm going to hand it back over to Michael. Lots of opportunities for you to reach out to folks to answer questions and so forth. And certainly at any time, feel free to reach out if there's anything I can do to help.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hoffman. That was a tour de force of the overall curriculum. I don't know how you do that in 10 minutes. It's really quite amazing. As you were speaking, I realized that there's one other goal. You gave the 2 goals about day 1 in the clerkships and day 1 in the residencies. But I would actually add, as we grow, day 1 when you walk out the door of your residency into your work as an attending physician, that you're prepared to be a lifelong learner, a teacher, an educator, and that you'll constantly be editing your own knowledge base as you move forward. And I would add that goal. Obviously, it's one of the things that we talk about a lot, but we'll add it as the years go by. So now what we'd like to do is sort of, come down a little bit to the details of opportunities for you to actually teach specifically in phase 1. As you've just heard very briefly about the structure of phase 1, what I'd like to do is sort of go through the teaching opportunities from the least time the time-sensitive ones into ones that require a little bit more of a commitment. And as I've mentioned before, I think it's absolutely critical. If something comes by and you're interested in it, please put into the chat your interest and indeed your contact information. And of course, all of your interests really should be cleared with your clinical chair or your academic chair that you interact with. But we certainly are eager for you to jump in. And indeed, someone will be monitoring the chat and we'll be getting back to you if something catches your interests. So with no further ado, let's start running through these. So again, I think, it's clear that this phase 1 is only 16 months, which is really a relatively short period of time, but it's so critical for us to both integrate and indeed build the skills of lifelong learning and not just give information. Next slide, please. So the first opportunity I want to mention is really something for everyone. I mean, this, quite honestly, I would think everyone should really be involved in terms of trying to indeed have students come into their offices for one time to do a show and tell, to give them a sense of what it is you do and to get people excited about it. This is an opportunity for you to really show off your specialty, to garner interest, to get students excited about what you specifically do. And indeed, it usually just is a one-time visit, although often these one-time visits turn into more visits, especially if the students enjoy it. We simply need to let us know that you're available for this short show and tell shadowing experience. And as I said, the contact number for the people that sort of sort through this are right on the bottom of each of the slides. In this case, the Student Affairs Office is the specific place that coordinates these one-time visits. Next slide, please. Again, the other opportunity, and I think Dr. Hoffman already mentioned, those large blocks that sort of look like lectures, which are not, are large group active learning sessions. And there are numerous ones still in the course of each week. These large group active learning sessions are in specific areas of content expertise. So everyone with varying content expertise would be able to do these. It does require some development to transform your previous sort of structured lectures into active learning, pushing back learning in the pre-work time, and then actually doing active case-based learning and other kinds of active interactive learning with the students in the actual classroom. You should be reaching out to the medical sciences office to specifically with your area of expertise and the potential for you to get involved in a large group active learning session. For those who really want to develop a little bit more of a relationship on a personal level, especially around your specialty, is the specialty mentors. So as you can imagine, in a 3-year curriculum, time is pretty premium, and the students really need to start thinking about what kind of specialties they're interested in and get guidance about that fairly early. And we try to match students with specialty mentors in the areas of their area of interest. So whoever you are in your various specialty, if you'd like to be a mentor for students, it basically requires you to meet with the students approximately quarterly throughout medical school. So this is a long-term relationship. Indeed, many of the mentors have become friends with those students and indeed have had the opportunity of following them out into their residencies and beyond. Again, the Office of Student Affairs, specifically Randy Kempton, is the person who coordinates this process. And it's really a big need because every student needs an individual. Some mentors take more than one, but we really would encourage you, if you're looking for really helping students grow and get interested in your specialty, it's a great opportunity to become a specialty mentor. And again, there's a fair amount of faculty development. There's a number of resources that we supply for the mentors. You know, this is just one example of the the little newsletter that goes out on a regular basis to the faculty members that are mentors to help them with what resources are available and indeed help guide them in the process of guiding the students. So for those that really want to spend a little bit more time really in the trenches in their offices with students, especially in internal medicine, family medicine, and pediatrics, we have a program called the Longitudinal Clinical Placement Part 1. Actually, that program launched literally last week. It's an opportunity for the students relatively early in their medical school careers to actually get out into the real world and interact with real patients in your offices. The learning objectives in this course are really around you modeling professional behavior, them working on their fundamental communication skills and physical exam skills, and beginning to form their diagnostic reasoning process. It really is one of the formative experiences that the students have. It's over the course of approximately 6 months. It usually begins in January and runs through June. The students come to visit your office approximately 6 to 10 times in the afternoons. And this is a wonderful opportunity for you to really develop a one-on-one relationship with students in this formative stage. Again, there'll be obviously faculty development and a faculty guide. There's a whole host of opportunities for you to learn exactly what the goals are for this experience. And we certainly encourage everyone who's in internal medicine, family medicine, and pediatrics that can have a student come into their office to let us know. We certainly are looking at all the time for more facilitators in longitudinal clinical placement. In the next slide, you'll see that we also have a program that begins when LCP1 finishes in the subspecialties. This is an opportunity for students to spend a little less time, usually 3 visits, somewhere between July and October of 2022. And again, all specialties are able to be represented in this particular program. So if you'd like to open your office or your operating room in terms of wherever it is that you practice and want to bring students in to see that in a little bit more than just a show and tell environment where they actually can get engaged and involved in the care of the patients, please let us know. And we obviously will try to match you up with students with an interest in your particular area. So most of these opportunities that I've just mentioned really where the student is coming to you for the most part, but there are opportunities where you can indeed come work with the students here at the School of Medicine. There are 3 small group programs that Dr. Hoffman's already mentioned: the Human Dimension Program, the Clinical Skills Program, and the Patient Presentation Problem-Based Curriculum. Each of these are small groups facilitated, 8 students facilitated by 1 faculty member. And indeed, for the Human Dimension, they meet every other Wednesday during the course of the whole entire phase 1, and some even continue into phase 2. For clinical skills, it's again alternate Wednesdays. And for the patient presentation problem curriculum, it's every Friday morning. And we'll talk about each of these programs. It's obviously, these are a bit of a more of a time commitment, but the return in terms of both learning for yourself and the nature of the relationship with your students is really quite rewarding and quite intense. The Human Dimension and Clinical Skills has gone back to being live recently. The patient presentation problem curriculum continues to be by Zoom, and probably moving forward will be hybrid. So there are opportunities for those that physically could not come to the school. Let's just walk through these programs very quickly so you have a sense of them. So the human dimension, I think, as Dr. Hoffman mentioned, is literally the kickoff program in the beginning of medical school. It immerses the students in the community and makes them realize that the community and the people in that community are really their teachers, not just patients, but the members of the community. And if you look through the human dimension program, it's a strong focus on developing humanism, professional identity, building resilience, and obviously coaching students in terms of the social determinants of health, which are such a critical and central part of this overall curriculum. And again, those that would be interested in HD as being HD facilitators, these are the time commitments basically on alternate Wednesday mornings. And again, the commitment, we usually ask people to stay with that group of students throughout phase one. The other things that we really are looking for are people who are a little bit knowledgeable or have an interest in community health, health equity, integrative health, and environmental health, which is the strong focus of this particular program. I think it's important to note that the faculty that join Human Dimension usually stay with Human Dimension. It's something that people have really come to love, both in terms of their interaction with students, but also the community of faculty that's been developed around this program has really been quite strong. And the retention rate in the Human Dimension program is incredibly high. So the problem presentation, the patient presentation, problem-based curriculum, I've been doing this for 5 years and I still get the title wrong. We really have to work on a catchier title, but the Ppc program is the program on Friday mornings with, again, 8 students in small groups where the learning for the whole week is completely integrated around a case. You know, Dr. Hoffman already mentioned the cases presented on Monday by one of our core faculty. And indeed, after that case is presented, pieces of it come out during the rest of the week. And on Friday morning, with the facilitators' help, the students have the opportunity to sort of unpack the case and see it through the lens of their basic science learning and get a better feel for the relevance of all of that basic science learning. It's the place where students really develop their clinical diagnostic skills in terms of diagnostic reasoning and really do a deep dive in complex learning about how critical pieces of science that they've learned really apply to the real world of patients. If you take a look real quickly, you'll see that the patient presentation curriculum really has a focus on a number of areas of learning, but in particular, I think diagnostic reasoning is a clear and important focus. I think it's absolutely critical that the people that do PPPC have a strong interest indeed in terms of thinking about thinking. Next slide. Then the third course, the role of specifically of the clinical skills program, this again is on Wednesday mornings during the first year, and it switches to Tuesday mornings, is again, this is the basic course that exposes students to various standardized patients, and we debrief those experiences with structured standardized patients, as well as simulation cases, and obviously the LCP experiences that students have as well. This is where students learn the basic communication skills required to do a history and of course the basic physical exam skills as well. Next slide. And again, these are the many roles of the CS facilitator. You certainly can review this on your own when you get your hands on the slides, but it's all the core things that you do every day. You know, how do you do documentation? How do you do oral presentations, as well as obviously documentation in the electronic medical record? And of course, how do you get and receive feedback and utilize that to improve? Next slide. And again, here's the core contact information. This slide will be made available to everyone afterwards in terms of there being any interest in these specific programs that I've just mentioned. These are the key people to get in touch with if you're interested, or chat right in right now with your contact information and we'll be more than happy to get in touch with you. Next slide, please. So that was a lot to swallow. If we were actually in an LGAL, I would then now be doing an active learning exercise or give you an exam. Regrettably, we don't have the time to do that today. We're going to move on to a little more content, and specifically, we're going to ask Dr. Ellen Hagopian, who is indeed the chair of our phase 2 curriculum, to discuss the many opportunities in the clerkships in phase 2, as well as the opportunities in the advanced clerkships and sub-internships and various other electives that we do in phase 3. Dr. Hagopian, thank you so much for joining us.
Great, thank you, Dr. Giuliano. So I am going to continue on the theme of something for everyone. Actually, Dr. Giuliano has said this a couple of days ago when we did this session. I said, that's actually very true. There's something for everyone. So like every good medical, and in my case, surgical educator, we always have objectives, right? So really what I want all of you to gain from this is to identify where you can get involved in the core clerkship or advanced clinical rotations, or even phase 3 curriculum. And then to identify someone in your department or a related department, that might be me, to help you explore opportunities further. Next slide, please. So Dr. Hoffman went over this already. We are talking about phase 2 and then in the next several slides, the second phase of our curriculum, which of course starts with that transitional clerkship, getting the students ready, and then 1 year of the core clerkships, and then additional several months that we call advanced clinical rotations. The students, of course, do this in any varied number of or sequences, and I am the surgery clerkship director. Next slide, please. So as I was redoing the slides, I said this the other day too, as I was redoing the slides, this I picked to be my absolute favorite slide. Why? Because when I first started giving this talk, even to my surgery faculty, there were just a few clinical sites there. Now look at it, I can't even fit all the clinical sites on this slide. Isn't this awesome? And we're growing every day. And that's thanks to all of you, really. It's just such a pleasure. Next slide, please. So you may say, okay, that's great, all these clinical places. Well, where's my specialty? Like, you know, surgery or internal medicine might be at my specialty, but I'm a neurologist. So please screenshot this. This is where the core clerkship students rotate. So you'll see a very wide variety, for example, family medicine, JFK, Mountainside, Palisades, and Ocean. And of course, when we first started, we only had a few, maybe 2 sites per clerkship, and we've grown. Look at how much we've grown. Next slide, please. So now we get to, well, great. So how can I get involved? Like, what are the various things that I can do? Speaking specifically about the core clerkship year, and that's that 1 year that mirrors what we all remember as being the 3rd year, that first part of phase 2. So there are several faculty roles. First off, day-to-day teaching. Students present on the wards. Students present in the operating room. So just that everyday, day-to-day teaching that faculty encounter the students doing, okay? The next, I like to think of it as the next step up, or the next part of that, those concentric circles that Dr. Hoffman always talks about, is the clerkship primary preceptor or preceptor. I'll get into this in the next slide, but we have a very robust model developed by Dr. Hoffman of where we link students to preceptors. They serve as mentors, etc. So get involved in your specialty, become a primary preceptor or a preceptor. And the third piece is teaching during our core clerkship days. As you saw, one of our huge strengths is the variety, the vastness of our system. Well, it means our students go they can be across, 60 plus miles. So what we generally do is bring the students together for 1 day per week within the core clerkships, an average of 1 day per week, where we give them very intentional instruction, typically very case-based. We, of course, have these active, large group active learning sessions, which are not too large, maybe at the most 25, at least this year. And then, of course, we have simulation skills sessions. We have a fantastic simulation laboratory and facility at the Nutley campus. We also, at least within the surgery clerkship, we utilize the simulation skills lab at Jersey Shore, which is like such a blessing. All of these resources are just such a blessing. Next slide, please. This is where I get into a little bit more depth in regard to the primary preceptor. Some of you may think, well, what exactly is that? What would I be doing? Well, you would be serving as that main point of contact for a student, or if you choose, maybe a couple of students. You would this role is not only a direct teaching role, but also as a mentor. We have a wonderful program of goal setting and growth development that we start in phase 1. It continues all throughout phase 2. The students intentionally set goals for themselves. They revisit them in the beginning, the middle point, and at the end of their clerkship. And the primary preceptor really serves as a robust mentor in helping guide the students. Of course, feedback and assessment is always part of being a preceptor and being faculty. And of course, being accessible and available to the student. Next slide, please. So this is, you may say, oh, that's great. The core clerkship teaching days, but one is mine. So for example, internal medicine is very consistently Thursdays. Pediatrics on Tuesdays, you see on the slide. Please screenshot this if you want it now before you get the slides. So you can see where your specialty has their core curriculum days. Maybe you want to get involved to do that. We have several faculty members who they might not be primary preceptors, but they're involved in teaching clinical skills in the simulation lab, giving instruction there, or even part of that case-based learning. Next slide, please. So this is an example. So what does this core curriculum look like? This is an example taken from the surgery clerkship of what we do week to week. And I would say that in general, across the clerkships, each week is framed by a patient presentation or a particular problem. And you'll see here the first week is all around orientation, really getting the students ready for doing their rotation. And then we have some simulation skills in the afternoon. The second week, all around the abdomen and presentations around the abdomen. And you can really see the rest. We also, most of the clerkships have a shelf review, typically that last week or right before the students take their shelf. Next slide, please. So let's move on. I'm not going to switch gears, but we'll move on in the phase 2 curriculum and talk a little bit about the advanced clinical rotations. So there are, just like in the core clerkship year, there are many roles where each of you can take on during what we call as ACR. For example, course director, you may have a specialty that is, not very widespread. Maybe the students have limited exposure, for example, ophthalmology. maybe perhaps you want to take on a student in your office for a 2 to 4 week elective beyond their core clerkship year. Maybe these students will be examining your particular specialty. This is a beautiful opportunity to create an elective. Elizabeth Colts, our Director of Instructional Design, has really been the lead and has helped to develop, I know I said this on Monday also, I think there's like over 100 electives. I mean, it's incredible the opportunities that we have for our students. Well, it might be that you want to not necessarily just do it by yourself. Maybe you want to join a team to develop an elective. Maybe it's, you know, within your group of physicians that you folks want to offer something for the students, and you want to participate in the design of this. That third bullet point, just very similar to the core clerkship year, teaching clinical faculty day to day. We have electives, like I said, close to 100 electives available. We also have a critical care selective and sub-internship. And I'll get into that in the next couple of slides. And of course, there's always mentorship. Next slide, please. This is like a really small taste of some of the electives that we have for our students. We have a full catalog, like I said, full of all kinds of opportunities for them and opportunities for you to get involved. Next slide, please. So I just want to talk a little bit about the sub-internship. The students are required to take a 4-week sub-internship. They have a choice of 4 specialties, as you see on the slide: pediatrics, general surgery, internal medicine, and family medicine. And these are the potential sites where they can rotate at. Perhaps you want to get involved here. Perhaps you want to get involved in that sub-internship, you know, being part of the clinical faculty day to day, or even the mentorship. These are the people who are in charge of the sub-internships at these various sites. Again, screenshot, or, you know, wait for the slides when we get them to you. Next slide, please. Just like we have a 4-week requirement for a sub-internship, we have a 2-week minimum requirement for a critical care selective. And look at all of the opportunities that the students have, and across various settings. Here you see again the contacts of who are the leads for these critical care selectives at the various sites. Perhaps you are a critical care medicine physician and you don't see your site here and you want to develop something. Please reach out to us to express your interest in taking on students. And again, these would be students who have completed their core clerkship year. Next slide, please. And this is into phase 3, so not changing gears, but again, moving on in the curriculum after ACR, we have phase 3. I know Dr. Hoffman spoke to you already about phase 3, and boy, man, I wish I had this. I was a 4th-year medical student. Imagine customizing your year and being able to do and really take a deeper dive into certain things. For example, certain specialties, specialty immersions, which are typically 3 months. Getting the students can get involved with research. Perhaps you have a lab, perhaps you have some clinical research. Dr. Terlecki is going to be speaking on research in the upcoming lectures. So you'll learn much more about that. And then there are also community-based projects that you can get involved in with the students. Next slide, please. And of course, all of our responsibility is being faculty. Once you join the medical school, We want you all to be involved. We want you to get involved. And we have a responsibility to our students and to our residents, teaching them and mentoring them along. And these are, of course, the general responsibilities: teaching, assessment and feedback, attending faculty development, just like this, and of course, actively engage in clinically teaching and in student feedback. Next slide, please. And so what does that look like? This is like one slide on a topic that probably should take about a 3-hour workshop, right? But starting when you have your student, starting with what is that goal? What does the student want to work on that day? If the student comes to your office, you start looking at the patient list. What is it that you want to focus on today? What's your goal? What do you want to do today? And then giving the students some opportunities to accomplish that goal. And then, of course, you evaluating them, assessing them. Did they meet their goal? Yes or no? And then having that bi-directional conversation with the student. How did you do? And then, of course, at the very end, coming up with an action plan. So important and critical for the students' growth. Next slide, please. And I think that this is my last slide. Please screenshot it if you haven't gotten slides already. These are all of the people who are major contacts across the departments. So you see the clerkship director, the clerkship itself, the clerkship director, and all of the associate clerkship directors, assistant clerkship directors, site directors, and of course the departmental chair. If you're not sure where to start, please reach out to me. I'm happy to connect you with people. If you know any of these people, please reach out directly to them. Because of course, if you are obstetrics and gynecology at Hackensack, the person you want to go to right away is Sarah Bittman. And she will definitely want to get you involved in the clerkship. If you're at a site that's not where the core clerkship is, Dr. Alvarez, the departmental chair. Of course, the departmental chairs, their doors are always open to speak to all of you too about how to get involved. So please utilize them too. Next slide, please. I think that this is the beautiful painting that Dr. Giuliano put in between the lectures. So it's been a pleasure. I welcome each and every one of you. Please reach out if you have any questions, and really looking forward to seeing your involvement.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hagopian. As I said in the beginning, there's something for everybody. There's obviously many, many opportunities for teaching. And with that said, next slide, please. With that said, we'll give you even more opportunities. It's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Stanley Tulecki. Dr. Tulecki was also sitting at that table with that clean piece of paper in the very beginning of developing the school, and has contributed on the curricular level, but has now really spent a lot of time focusing on research and scholarship at the School of Medicine. And he's going to take us through a tour de force of all of the various opportunities that are available at the School of Medicine for you to get involved here as well. Dr. Tulecki, thank you so much for joining us.
Dr. Giuliano, thank you for the generous introduction. Welcome, colleagues. Welcome, new faculty to the School of Medicine. What I'd like to do for the next just 5 or 10 minutes is tell you about how we envision research and scholarship at the School of Medicine, as well as how we support it. In the next slide, a definition that was near and dear to our late Dean, Dean Stanton, and has been embraced by Dean Boskamp and all of us here at the school. And that is that the ideal academic and learning environment is one that promotes lifelong learning and develops an appreciation of research, scholarship, and innovation. And indeed, in the next slide, we envision that environment and the environment of our interprofessional, next slide, please, health sciences campus as a true culture of inquiry in a community of scholars, whether it be through the Center for Discovery and Innovation, which is just simply connected by a skywalk to our building, whether it be our interprofessional interactions with the College of Nursing and the School of Health and Medical Sciences, whether it be interactions that we're developing with Quest Diagnostics. That's right, their world headquarters right here on our campus, some 200 yards behind us. Whether it be colleagues, all of you walking our halls, the clinicians, the basic scientists, the clinical trial leads, the project investigators, and so on. This has truly become a culture of inquiry, and it is indeed a community of scholars, of course, limited by COVID and what's happened over the last 2 years or so. Next slide, please. This is simply a description and overview of those responsible for working with all of you to try to assist you in your research and scholarship efforts. And they include Jian Han, Michael Oppenheim, Nicole, and Nefany. Please, the most important address here is ORGS, the Office of Research and Graduate Studies, at hmhn.org. You'll have these slides, but that's the important one. If you have any question about anything, we pride ourselves on trying to address all inquiries in timely manner. Next slide, please. In terms of some of the resources that we have in place or that we are building, include, for example, a research database. In the next slide, what we have in this database is it is a document sortable by department, searchable by keyword, providing for faculty, for students, and for chairs and others, what are the research activities being conducted by their faculty. There is a focus in this database on those projects that are available to our students. So you can imagine our students look to this to see who's doing what. Perhaps I could follow up. Perhaps I could work in that lab, in that clinical setting, in that translational research setting, in that medical education setting, in that community health setting, in that community projects, global health setting. And for new faculty, I encourage you to please make a note of the link here on this slide. That will take you to that database. And within 5 minutes, you'll type in some information and we will be able to pass along the opportunities that you have.
Thank you.
To all of us. You're welcome. To our faculty and to our students. Next slide. We also put together an accurate and up-to-date publications list. So maybe you're wondering, in OBGYN, in anesthesiology, in medical sciences, what publications are coming from that group here at Hackensack? And perhaps I could use that as a springboard to develop relationships, to develop collaborations. That publication list was made available to you. And if you didn't get it, please just reach out to ORGS and we'll immediately send it to you. And again, you might find of interest the roughly 900 publications that our faculty contributed to just last year. On the next slide. Very, very important, colleagues, going forward. You are now a member of the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine, so please note your affiliation. They made it very clear to me that this was important, so I put all of these stars. When you publish a paper, when you publish an abstract, a poster, or any activity presented at a meeting, please include your department, obviously, and the fact that you are a faculty member at the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine in Nutley, New Jersey. Thank you. Next slide. We have also put together on our campus an interprofessional research seminar series. We have partnered with the College of Nursing, with the School of Health and Medical Sciences to try to bring in speakers with a focus on an interprofessional series of interactions. And I think on the next slide or next two slides, we have some examples of the kinds of talks, including Steve Ganny, a physician from the network, talking about translational and clinical research in pediatric endocrinology. We had people from the Center for Discovery and Innovation talking about biomimicking in the bone niche and cancer. We've had our bioethicist, Dr. Pilkington, talk about autonomy in medical research and practice. Next slide. And a series of others, biomarker discovery for cancer, novel strategies for cancer immunotherapy, and so on. The point is that there are a variety of speakers. On the next slide, I invite you to take a look at this webpage, go to the link and see the seminars that are coming up, as well as, if you're interested, gaining access to those that have already occurred. In addition to those that focus on sort of new research, we also have, thank you, Joe, for sharing that. We also have an investigator training lecture series where we've worked very closely with the Office of Research Administration, Dr. Sawchuk and his colleagues, Dr. Tamara Friedman and others, and we have partnered. And so brought to you by Hackensack Meridian Health, as well as by the School of Medicine, we present a training lecture series. On the next slide is our overview, the overview being that we hope to guide researchers on how to get started, how to obtain funding, the feasibility of a particular study, study design, what are the regulatory and scientific issues surrounding research, how to manage the project before, during, and after, trying to submit for funding, how do you publish, and so on. And these presentations are very well attended by faculty and clinicians across the network, as they are eligible for continuing medical education credit. And just as an example, on the next slide are some of the sessions there: research mentoring, the process of publishing. I had a session just a few months ago about critically reviewing biomedical literature. We had Linda Syracusa, one of our faculty members in medical sciences, who sits on NIH study sections on a regular basis, talking about reviewing grants. And I tell you, if you're interested in submitting a grant, that is a talk that you'd like to see as you think about what you're putting together for the grant. What is it that they're looking for? How to put it together? How to be effective, and so on. Next slide. We also have, for those that are thinking, that's really interesting, research and scholarship, I'd like to get involved. And I wonder, if I could just have a little bit of support, a little bit of funding, I could go ahead and generate the kind of pilot data that would allow me then to pursue extramural funding. Well, through the School of Medicine, through the Office of Research Administration and Dr. Sawchuk, and Hackensack's Foundation, we have put together a research pilot project funding program that has been extant for some 2 years now. And inquiries about that, please reach out to orgs at hmhn.org. Next slide. I want everyone to understand also that it's important to us that we take a very broad view of what constitutes research and scholarship, and that it's not simply acquisition of new knowledge, which is wonderful. Discovery is just great, but there's also scholarship through integrating that new knowledge, of applying that new knowledge, of teaching and disseminating that new knowledge. And that falls under sort of Boyer's model of what constitutes research and scholarship. And the only thing we ask is that if you go and you want to integrate, or you want to apply, or you want to disseminate that research and scholarship, that you also apply certain criteria on the next slide. And that includes that, you know, you put together projects that have clear goals, that you've prepared, that you have appropriate methods, that the results are significant, that you've thought about how to present them, and that you have thought about this, you know, with a reflective eye, thinking about the importance, what was important about the study, what things need to be done going forward. Next slide, please. We also, colleagues, have a mentorship network. Please reach out to ORGS should you wonder about how it is that you're able to carve out time to focus on research and scholarship. What kinds of you know, mentors are in place that I could work with to ask questions about research and scholarship. We have a vast network and have been able to put several investigators, several faculty members in contact with mentors to be able to guide them and give them the kind of instruction to help them along. So that network exists. Please reach out to us. Next slide. And finally, I want to mention that, you know, sort of tying back to what we just heard about with respect to phases 1, 2, and 3. Phase 1, pre-clerkship. Phase 2, the clerkship phase, and then phase 3, the highly individualized opportunity to really pursue that which is important to you personally and professionally. Understand that students will approach you about opportunities in phase 1 and in phase 2, and we have a very, very clear path for those students. They will review with advisors and other mentors to make sure that they have the bandwidth to be able to complement what they're doing in phases 1 and or 2, and reach out and do work extracurricularly. And then obviously we have a phase 3 opportunity where students will work in labs, in a clinical setting, in a medical education setting, in translational work, in community programs, and in global health, in activities that are credit bearing. And those are designed as part of phase 3. Colleagues, again, I welcome you aboard. There are many, many opportunities, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you as appropriate. Dr. Giuliano, I thank you, and I yield back anytime.
Thank you so much, Dr. Talecki, and we thank you for joining us and indeed giving us a tour de force of all of the opportunities. Again, everyone's drinking from a fire hose today in terms of all of the various places and ways in which we can contribute to the School of Medicine. We certainly hope that you'll take advantage of that. Well, last but certainly not least is Dean Sullivan. Dr. Sullivan is going to touch on some of the critical student policies that we all need to be aware of as we interact with students, and more importantly, the resources that are available to students and to faculty as you enter our faculty. So Dr. Sullivan, if you could join us, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Thank you so much, and welcome everyone to the faculty. This is really exciting to hear and see all of you. It is really in the spirit of It Takes a Village. I'd like to invite you to think about the support that we give our students as also support that we give our faculty to support our students, because you are in the first line of working with our students. So next slide, please. I'd just like to go over a few areas that are so that you are aware of what kinds of resources are available to our students, and as an extension of that to you to support our students. So the Office of Student Affairs and Wellbeing comprises the Advising and Career Development Unit, Academic Support, Student Accessibility Services, Wellness, and Student Life. Next slide, please. And just to give you an idea, our office, our Advising and Career Development really is an advisor who is assigned to every single student upon entering the school and follows them for their 3 or 4 year journey to help them obtain the most appropriate and effective education and they provide support in a variety of ways, as well as they're the first point of contact, and they direct them to other supports. Next slide, please. Our academic support unit is is medical education specialists, learning specialists, to really help students who may need support transitioning from undergraduate school to an accelerated program in medicine. And many students take advantage of this opportunity to really strengthen their study skills. We also have regular peer tutoring and review sessions run by actual students weekly. Next slide, please. Accessibility services. This particular office, our student accessibility services, connects students who may need accommodations. And I have to say, from a faculty point of view, that a majority of students actually start the discussion if they haven't received accommodations at this point in their academic career. They often will have a conversation with faculty who will then direct them to the Office of Accessibility Services or my office, and we redirect them so that they can consider receiving accommodations when in the past this has not been an issue for them. Next slide, please. We have a dedicated wellness coordinator within the School of Medicine, really to address the issues, and she oversees a wellness committee of volunteer students, really to address the issues and hear firsthand on a day-to-day basis which ways we might be able to support our students. Next slide, please. Also, I just want to remind our faculty and let you know that when you're dealing with students, you are not alone. We have a full counseling service, both on site. We have a counselor that comes to our site, to the IHSC Center, as well as a 24/7 student assistance program that provides support to our students. Next slide, please. We also have a very robust student life within the Interprofessional Health Sciences building, and that is made up of a student government representing all 4 years now, finally in the 4th year, representing student clubs and specialty interest groups, of which we have together over 50 of these groups, and they're always growing. Latest is I believe Wilderness Medicine Specialty Interest Group. A few really important policies I just want to mention as faculty that will come your way: a FERPA, Title IX, and providing a positive learning environment and preventing student mistreatment. And I'll just touch upon these so that this language becomes familiar to you. This training is done out in the field, as well as the students are provided with training on these areas so that they become familiar with them as well. Next slide, please. The FERPA is really our HIPAA in academic worlds. It really reminds you that our students' privacy and information is really important as a student, so that we don't, we remind you that that information is not distributed. Next slide, please. And that includes all the standard information that is a student, the list of students is not distributed widely for any other reason other than their academic assignment to you. Next slide, please. Title IX, you may all be familiar with. Sex Discrimination Prohibition protects against sexual harassment and sexual violence and extends to claims of discrimination based on gender identity or failure to conform to stereotypical notions of masculinity or femininity. Students are heavily familiar with this, as there are policies that are reviewed with them. And they're also very active in making sure that these concerns are raised so that to prevent discrimination going forward. So if they're very lively group of students that really takes to heart important matters related to taking care of one another. And I think that's shown us in their training of each other in the area of Title IX. Next slide, please. Also, the idea of our policy on providing a positive learning environment, which we assume that will be the case in all cases, but we also know that there may be occurrences where there's something that is perceived as student mistreatment. We do review this with the students. We invite them to discuss it. We discuss examples of student mistreatment. We review it with them in orientation, and we provide a lot of consultation for faculty around supporting students who may feel that the situation is not in their best interest, is not supporting their learning. Next slide, please. Just to give you the baseline of what the AAMC views as student mistreatment, intentional or unintentional behaviors that shows disrespect for the dignity of others and unreasonably interferes with the learning process. This includes sexual harassment, discrimination, harassment based on race, religion, ethnicity, gender, and sexual orientation, humiliation, psychological or physical punishment, and the use of grading and other forms of assessment in a punitive manner. Again, our obligation is to inform faculty and students of this. I'm happy to say that this is not the case in that most of our students report an incredibly positive learning environment. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I'm just going to jump through this because I know we're at over time. An individual, I want to point out that an individual doesn't have to be the recipient of mistreatment to report it, and that we invite their colleagues, if they witness this, to report it in a timely way to us so that we can address it appropriately. Next slide, please. We also provide counseling, coaching, and direction for students to other resources who do come forward and have a concern. And there are many, many points at which students can engage us in making sure that they have a positive learning environment. I will say first and foremost, they address you. They usually go right to faculty and really have a good discussion with you as faculty on how best to strengthen their learning environment. And that's often what the issue is resolved with just a discussion. Next slide, please. I'll just mention we do have a Title IX coordinator, Ms. Diane Russo, and concerns may be brought to her. There's a comply line anonymous reporting available so that we can continue a dialogue with someone who wishes to remain anonymous. And certainly complaints and concerns or reports of concerns can come directly to me. Next slide, please. Both my cell and office can reach me pretty readily. I invite you to reach out with any questions that you might have and enjoy your role as faculty. You will love our students. You will love them. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dean Sullivan. That was a wonderful presentation of a whole host of factors that are so critical for everyone to know. You know, I'm going to be respectful of time. It's already at 2:30, and I know from a cognitive standpoint, probably everyone's pretty fried. I do ask one question. Actually, it was a trick question because I don't think anyone will know the exact answer, but I've been counting, and we've talked about lifelong learning at least about 12 separate times. And if time had permitted, we were actually going to do a little faculty development at the end of this session, which I'm going to pass over. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the format of freeze-dried faculty development. So Joe, if you could push the slides all the way to the very last slide. We will be doing these mini sessions called freeze-dried faculty development, which will be just 2-minute little blurbs that we'll be pushing out to your faculty around a whole host of subjects. I guess one of the first subjects will be about self-directed learning and active learning as the core pedagogy within the School of Medicine. This orientation is not a great example of that because the nature of the information that we just need to transmit. But indeed, the School of Medicine and all the opportunities that we've just discussed are really about active learning, developing educational relationships with our students, and indeed helping them go through this incredibly powerful process of both medical school residency and beyond. And again, I'd like to thank all of you for participating. We'll be staying on the line for those of you who can continue to join us. If you have any questions about the programs themselves that we've talked about, opportunities for teaching, or the core pedagogy and structure of the curriculum. So thanks again. And for those of you who have to drop off, please don't hesitate to jump out. And for those that would like to stay on, please, we'll be happy to stay here and answer questions either through chat or through just popping on your mics and asking directly. Thank you everyone for joining us.